Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Now we are also available on Telegram, so join our Telegram channel by clicking on the link that is available in the description below to get the latest updates from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 20th April 2021, and the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start the discussion. But before that, there is an announcement that the quality improvement program for the preliminary examination of 2021 have started from Monday, that is today. And these include 50 hours of targeted course of the preliminary examination, and there will be a balance between the core and the current affairs section. And this will help you in having a targeted approach for this year's preliminary examination. The next batch will start from 3rd of May. For more details, look at the link that has been given in the description box below. With this, let's start the discussion now. Now, this article on page number 6 is related to the ordinance route that is being used by the central government for repromulgating the ordinance related to the establishment of a commission for air quality management in the national capital region. Now, even before this repromulgation of the ordinance, a debate was there regarding the way in which the repromulgation route undermines the legislative power that has been provided to the parliament and the state legislatures under the Indian constitution. And this has led to the question of repromulgation of the ordinances without getting them ratified by the parliament. And this clearly undermines the legislative powers of the parliament that have been conferred on it by the Constitution of India. So in this discussion, we will look at the issues that are associated with the ordinance route that is taken by the central government as well as the state legislatures under the General Studies paper 2 under the topic Constitution. Now, modern constitutions, as you all know, are based on the doctrine of separation of power. And this theory of separation of power was first propounded by the French political philosopher Montesquieu. Now, Montesquieu asserted that concentration of power in one hand is dangerous and it leads to despotism. And accordingly, there is a need to check the misuse of power. And for this, he proposed separating the functions of executive, legislative, and the judicial departments of the government to operate as balance against each other. So the power has been divided in the three branches of the state. The first one is the legislative branch, second is the executive branch, and third one is the judicial branch. And this has been done in order to maintain a check and balance on each other's powers. And keeping in mind this doctrine of separation of power, the Indian Constitution provides for legislatures to make the laws, executive to implement the laws, and judiciary to interpret and enforce these laws. Now, the separation of power is implemented in different ways in the presidential form of government and in the parliamentary form of government. So, as you might all know that in the presidential form of government, which is being practiced in the United States of America, all the three branches exist and there is complete separation of power. And that is because the executive is not a part of the legislature in the United States of America. However, as compared to the United States of America's presidential system, in the Indian parliamentary system, the executive is also member of the legislature. And as such, it is commented sometimes that the Indian democracy does not practice the original doctrine of separation of power. Now, even though executive is a member of the legislative branch, and this you might all know that the Indian Prime Minister as well as the cabinet ministers and other ministers are members of the legislature or are the members of parliament. However, in the United States of America, the president as well as his cabinet are not the members of the Congress. And that is why a clear separation of power is not visible in the Indian democratic system. Although the judicial branch is completely separate from both the executive as well as the legislative branch, both in the United States of America and in India. Now, as a separation of power has been provided, the legislative branch deals with the legislative or the making of laws in a nation. And under this scheme of separation of power, the legislative branch or the parliament and the state legislatures have been provided with the power of legislating or with the power of making laws in the nation. While the executive branch, that is the central government as well as the state governments, have been provided with the responsibility of implementing these laws that are made by the legislatures. So as far as the legislative power that has been provided in the Indian Constitution, the Constitution provides the legislative powers to the parliament as well as to the state. And it provides for a threefold distribution of legislative subjects between the center and the states. In this, three types of lists have been provided. First is the union list, second is the state list, and then there is concurrent list. And these lists have been provided in the 7th schedule. So as we all know that the parliament can legislate on all the subjects that are listed in the union list, while the state legislatures can legislate on the subjects that are mentioned in the state list. While as far as the concurrent list is concerned, both the parliament as well as the state legislatures can legislate on these subjects. And there are certain limitations that have been imposed on the legislative powers of the state legislatures. And these limitations are highlighted in what is famously called as the doctrine of federal supremacy. Now, to understand this better, you can always refer to the standard textbooks of Indian polity like the M. Lakshmikant or D.D. Basu, in which you can clearly understand the distribution of legislative subjects between the center and the state. However, the issue here is that of ordinance, and let us restrict our discussion related to the ordinance making power of the president as well as the governor. So, although the legislative power has been provided to the parliament and the state legislatures, the constitution vests the law making power in the executive also. And this power can be exercised by the executive only in the exceptional circumstances. That is, the executive also has the lawmaking power. However, there are certain limitations that have been imposed on this lawmaking power of the executive. And this lawmaking power of the executive is popularly known as the ordinance making power of the president at the central level, while it is known as the ordinance making power of the governor at the state level. And accordingly, the ordinance making power has been provided to both the president and the governors of the states. And this power is known as the law making power of the executive. And this is different from the law making power of the legislatures. Now, what exactly is the background of this ordinance making power, and what exactly is the ordinance making power of the president? Let us look at this. So this ordinance making power was first provided for in the Government of India Act of 1935. And this allowed the then Governor General of India to promulgate ordinances in such circumstances that made it necessary for him to take immediate action. However, as far as the question of including the ordinance making power in the Indian Constitution is concerned, there were debates in the Constituent Assembly. So the first question was that whether the executive should have the power to promulgate ordinance that would have the force of law should be included in the Constitution or not. In this regard, some argued that ordinances should be used only in case of emergencies, while others argued that lawmaking power should rest only with the legislature and not with the executive. Now, as a middle ground, the limits have been provided in the Constitution on the ordinance making powers of the president and the governor, and the scheme of ordinance has been taken from the Government of India Act 1935 in the modern Indian Constitution as well. And accordingly, ordinance making power of the president has been provided for in the Article 123 of the Indian Constitution. And this article empowers the president to promulgate ordinances during the recess of the parliament. That is, only when the parliament is not in session. Now, a key feature of the ordinances that are promulgated by the president is that they have the same force and effect as an act of the parliament. But the only difference between the ordinances that are issued by the president and the acts that are made by parliament is that these ordinances are in the nature of temporary laws, and these are not permanent laws. So what are the limitations that have been imposed on the ordinance making power of the president? Let us look at these limitations and how are these ordinances that are issued by the president temporary in nature. Now, the first limitation is that the ordinance making power of the president is not a parallel power of legislation with that of the powers of legislation of the parliament. And this is because the president can promulgate an ordinance only when both the houses of the parliament are not in session or when either of the two houses of the parliament is not in session. So simply, an ordinance can only be issued when either both the houses of the parliament are not in session or only when one house is in session. And this power of promulgating an ordinance has been provided even when only one house of the parliament is in session, because a law can be passed by both the houses only and not by one house alone. And as such, when an ordinance has been made when both the houses are in session, is declared as null and void. And accordingly, it is said that the power of the president to legislate by the ordinance is not a parallel power of legislation. Secondly, the ordinance making power is coexistensive as regards all matters except the duration, with the law-making powers of the Parliament. That is, the ordinance-making power is similar to that of the law-making power of Parliament. However, the duration that has been provided to the ordinance-making power is very limited. That is, the laws made through ordinance have a limited duration and they are temporary in nature. This is because the Constitution provides that the ordinances are required to be approved by the Parliament within 6 weeks of commencement of the next session of Parliament. And if these ordinances are not passed by the Parliament within this time frame, they cease to be in force. And that is why it is said that the ordinance making power is coexistensive as regards all matters except duration with the law making power of the Parliament. Further, the Constitution provides that there should not be a gap of more than 6 months between the two sessions of the Parliament. So the maximum life of an ordinance can be 6 months and 6 weeks. Further, it has been provided that the President can also withdraw an ordinance at any point of time. However, his power of ordinance making is not a discretionary power, and this decision of issuing an ordinance has to be taken on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. It also needs to be highlighted that the limitations on the ordinances that are issued by the President are the same as that of the limitations that are imposed on the legislative powers of the Parliament. That is, Constitution cannot be amended by the way of issuing ordinance in a manner similar to which the parliaments cannot amend the Constitution by issuing or enacting ordinary laws. And for that, a constitutional amendment has to be brought in. So similarly, through the issuing of ordinance, the fundamental rights cannot be taken away. So this brings us to an important case that was filed in the Supreme Court in 1970, and this is known as the Cooper's case. Now, under this, the Supreme Court said that the President can make an ordinance only when he is satisfied that the circumstances exist that render it necessary for him to take immediate action. However, the Supreme Court ruled that the President's satisfaction can be questioned in a court on the ground of malafide intention. And under this, the Supreme Court said that the intent of proroguing the House should not be to bypass the parliamentary decision and circumventing the authority of the Parliament. So if it is established that the President had prorogued the Parliament in order to promulgate an ordinance, such an ordinance can be struck down by the Supreme Court. Further, this provision of the satisfaction of the President was made permanent by the 38th Constitutional Amendment Act. However, the President's satisfaction was made justiciable or was subject to judicial review by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1978. So this is again a limitation that has been imposed on the President's ordinance making power based on the judgment of the Supreme Court in the Cooper's case. So the next question here is, how many ordinances have been issued since 1950s? So this graph clearly highlights the number of ordinances that have been issued per year since 1952. So in the early 1950s, the central ordinances were issued at an average rate of 7.1 ordinances per year. And the maximum number of ordinances were issued in 1990s at about 19.6 ordinances per year. However, the number of ordinances that were issued again declined in the 2010s, and the number of ordinances issued per year reduced to about 7.9 ordinances per year. However, of late, this government has been resorting to the ordinance making route, and accordingly 16 ordinances were issued in 2019 and 15 ordinances were issued in 2020, and in 2021 4 ordinances have already been issued. So this highlights that the governments have been taking the ordinance route for bypassing the legislative powers of the Parliament. Now the issue is not that of the promulgation of the ordinances. However, the issue is that of repromulgation of the ordinances. Now repromulgation simply means that once an ordinance has been issued by the President, the government does not take any effort for getting that ordinance approved by the Parliament, and once the session of the Parliament is over, the President again repromulgates or reissues that ordinance. And that is how this process of repromulgation of ordinance undermines the legislative power of the Parliament. So in the famous DC Wadhwa case, the Supreme Court highlighted that between 1967 to 1981, the governor of Bihar had promulgated about 256 ordinances, and all these were kept in force for periods ranging from 1 to 14 years by repromulgation from time to time. The court also ruled that successive repromulgation of ordinances with the same text without any attempt to get the bills passed by the assembly would amount to violation of the constitution, and the ordinance so repromulgated is liable to be struck down. And in this case, the Supreme Court held that the ordinance making power was an exceptional power of lawmaking that is provided to the executive. And as such, this exceptional power of lawmaking through ordinance cannot be used as a substitute for the legislative power of the state legislatures or the legislative powers of the parliament. Similarly, a five-judge constitution bench of Supreme Court in 1986 ruled that repromulgation of ordinances was contrary to the spirit of the constitution or was contrary to the constitutional scheme. And as such, the Supreme Court held that the strategy of repromulgation would be repugnant to the constitutional scheme as it would enable the executive to transgress its constitutional limitations in the matter of lawmaking. That is, by using the route of repromulgation of ordinances, the executive is trying to breach the constitutional limit that has been imposed on it by the Indian Constitution. Now, despite the judgment by the Constitutional Bench, the repromulgation route was resorted to by both the central government as well as the state governments. For example, in 2013 and 14, the Securities Laws Ordinance was promulgated 3 times. And similarly, an ordinance to amend the Land Acquisition Act was issued in December 2014, and it was repromulgated twice in April and May 2015. So these instances clearly highlight that even when the Constitutional Bench has talked about the issues with the repromulgation of ordinances, the central government has resorted to this route regularly. Again in 2017, a 7-judge constitutional bench declared the practice of repromulgation to be unconstitutional. And the judgment concluded that repromulgation of ordinances is a fraud on the constitution and is a subversion of the democratic legislative processes. And this is clear because repromulgation is a process that is misused by the central governments as well as the state governments for bypassing the parliament as well as the state legislatures. Now, ignoring this judgment, the central government has repromulgated the ordinance that establishes a commission for the air quality management in the national capital region. And this highlights that the central governments as well as the state governments are not paying heed to the constitutional judgments that have been provided regarding the repromulgation of the ordinances or the limitations that have been set on the repromulgation of ordinances by the constitutional bench. So what is the way forward here? So as we all know that already certain limitations have been provided on the ordinance route by both the constitution as well as the Supreme Court judgments. And we note that the Supreme Court judgments in the Cooper's case, DC Wadhwa case and in the 2017 case have already provided for limitations on the repromulgation of ordinances by the central governments and the state governments. Now, although these limitations have been provided, both the central as well as the state governments are using this route or rather misusing this constitutional route. So it is suggested that as the governments both at the center and the states are violating this principle, the legislatures and the courts should check the practice. And by doing so, the separation of power and the concepts of checks and balances will be put to effective use. And by not checking this practice, both the legislature and the judiciary are abdicating their responsibility to the constitution under the scheme that has been provided in the Indian Constitution regarding the doctrine of separation of power. And accordingly, one of the suggestions is that one way of minimizing the need of ordinances could be by increasing the number of parliament sittings. So if parliament will meet regularly, the need for ordinances will be limited. And the concern regarding the repromulgation of ordinance is that it undermines the legislative authority that has been provided to the parliament as well as the state legislature. And when laws are passed by the state legislature as well as the parliament, they are effectively discussed and different opinions are put forward and a public debate is generated on such laws. And that is why laws that are passed by the parliaments are more effective as compared to the ordinances. So these are few issues related to the ordinance making power of the president. And with this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 7 is related to India-Russia relations, and it talks about a reset in the India-Russia relations in the context of the geopolitical changes that are happening presently. Now, we all know that the India-Russia relationship has been a very important one for the past half century or so. And in this background, Russia has supported India various times, including the 1971 war with Pakistan. So in this context, recently, the Russian foreign minister had visited India 2 weeks back. And the principal objective of this visit was to prepare the ground for the visit of Vladimir Putin, who is the president of Russia, later this year in India. Now, for past 20 years, annual summit is being held between the president of Russia and the Indian Prime Minister. However, 2020 was the only year when there was a break in the annual summit between the Russian president and the Indian Prime Minister. In this background, there was speculation that this visit did not happen because of India's alignment with the United States of America in the Indo-Pacific policy in terms of participation in the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue and the US's anti-China policy, and this is leading to undermining of India-Russia relations. So in this background, let us look at the key aspects of the India-Russia relations and how they are changing in the emerging geopolitical scenario from the General Studies Paper 2 point of view in the topic International Relations. Now, there are a lot of emerging geopolitical scenarios that are playing out, and these are likely impacting the India-Russia relations. First in this line is the India's alignment with the United States of America in its Indo-Pacific strategy. We all know that India has been aligning with the United States of America in the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue in the Indo-Pacific strategy. And this is one of the key concerns between India-Russia relations. We all know that US and Russia have been adversaries for almost after the Second World War. Further, Russia has been one of the biggest defense partners for India. However, of late, India has signed all the 4 foundational defense agreements with the United States of America, which clearly highlights that India is tilting towards the United States of America in terms of its defense strategy. However, India has insisted that its Indo-Pacific initiatives like the Quadrilateral Security Dialogues, etc., seek for a cooperative and rule-based order in the Indo-Pacific. And such initiative will not lead to a politico-military alliance, and that is why Russia need not be concerned with the India's cooperation with the United States of America. However, already experts have outlined that India's alignment with the United States of America is going to be one of the key issues in the India-Russia relationship's future. Then recently, Russia-China bonhomie is also being witnessed. And in this line, India has raised the concerns about Russia's China embrace, that is, the improving relations between Russia and China, which include close political, economic, and defense cooperation. Now, Russia accounted for about 77% of China's arms imports between 2016 to 2020, which is one of the big numbers. Also, India has already raised apprehensions about their technology and intelligence sharing. We all know that India is already concerned about the assertiveness of China on its northern borders. And then there are also speculations about a future Russia-China military alliance being developed against the United States of America and its Indo-Pacific strategy, which will make India and Russia standing at odds despite having a half century of good relations. Another issue that is affecting India-Russia relations is the Russia-Pakistan bonhomie. And in this line, the Russian foreign minister had recently visited Pakistan after he visited India. And this is the first time a Russian minister has visited Pakistan. So that is also a cause of concern for India, because at this visit, the Russian foreign minister highlighted that Russia would be strengthening the Pakistan's counter-terrorism capability. And this is being seen as a step to increase the Russian weapon supply to Pakistan. Now, Russia is Pakistan's second largest defense supplier, and it accounts for about 6.6% of its arms imports in 2016 to 2020. Further, both the countries are already cooperating on joint counter-terrorism drills and are sharing perspectives on the military tactics and strategic doctrines. Now, as the Russian arms exports are increasing to Pakistan, India is already concerned that it is one of the biggest importers of the Russian defense supplies. And that is why this will lead to sharing of the same intelligence and the technologies with both the countries who are adversaries. That is, if Russia shares the same technology and intelligence with both Pakistan and India, it will undermine India's security interests. Then also there are concerns regarding a new Cold War playing out because of the US-China angle. And in this line, the US is taking on both China and Russia, and it is leading to increasing relationship or improving relationship between China and Russia at this point of time, and it is driving them together. In this background, the experts have speculated that this is accelerating the move to bipolarity towards a new Cold War. Now, you might all know that during the Cold War, the world was divided into 2 camps. One was led by the erstwhile USSR, and one was led by the United States of America. So a similar bipolarity is being witnessed because United States of America is clearly taking on China and Russia, and this is increasing the bipolarity in the geopolitics because of increasing or improving relationship between China and Russia on the one hand and United States of America on the other hand. So there are speculations that this might lead to buildup of military blocs on the same lines that were witnessed during the Cold War between the erstwhile USSR and the United States of America led camps. So now what are the concerns for India-Russia relationship in this background? Now Russia had supplied 49% of India's arm imports between 2016 to 2020. Now this share although looks very high, however this has been falling off late. And in this regard, the concerns have been raised by India regarding the potential technology secrets that can be shared with India's adversaries like Pakistan and China because of improving relationship between Russia and China and Pakistan. Further, India is concerned about the sanctions that can be imposed on India for importing defense equipments from Russia under the America's CAATSA law. And CAATSA law simply stands for Countering the America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, and it was passed under the Donald Trump's regime. And it seeks to impose sanctions on all those countries that are cooperating with the America's adversaries. And these include Iran, Russia, etc. And that is why India is concerned that there can be sanctions that can be imposed on India if it keeps on importing defense equipments from Russia. And clearly, this is one of the concerns in the imports of S-400 missile deal between India and Russia. Then another key issue in the India-Russia relations and why India-Russia relations need to be improved is the geography that is involved in the geopolitics. Now looking at the geographical location of India, the Eurasian landmass to India's north is dominated by both Russia and China, as is clearly visible from this map. Because India shares its northern borders with China and it also has increasing influence on the Eurasian countries. And besides this, the Central Asian countries, etc., are already under the influence of Russia. And for India to pursue its strategic and security interests in Central Asia, West Asia and Afghanistan, it needs to have engagement with the region through the connectivity projects. And these will include the International North-South Transport Corridor, which can be seen in this map, and also improving the connectivity through the Chabahar port. And for improving India's strategic and security interests in the Central Asia, West Asia and Afghanistan, India-Russia relations are key to it. So for pursuing these interests, India will have to effectively manage its relations with Russia. So in this background, the author has cautioned that India needs to explore its geopolitical space within these processes that are at play. And in this background, India needs to maximize its global influence by clearly standing away from the alliances and retaining the autonomy in its foreign policy. And it is in this background that India's partnership with Russia becomes important for India's continental interests in terms of security and connectivity, and also the defense capability of India. And as such, the author suggests that the depth of relationship between both these countries will depend upon the willingness and the capacity of both the countries to show mutual sensitivity to core security concerns. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 6 is associated with the impact of one of the most influential technologies of our age, that is artificial intelligence, on the children of today. So the concern here has been raised regarding the impact of the artificial intelligence on the children or the harm that it causes to the children. And if this harm is caused on the children by the artificial intelligence, that harm can last well into their future, following them right into their adulthood. However, it has also been highlighted that although there are certain concerns regarding the harms that are or the risks that are imposed on the children by the artificial intelligence, there is huge potential for the artificial intelligence to do good for the children as well. In that, it can be used for improving the learning, development of the children, for their safety, and also will increase opportunities for the children. And accordingly, the author says that the artificial intelligence should be designed in such a manner that its impact on the young minds is not adverse and it could be effectively utilized for their overall development and improvement. Now, artificial intelligence from the science and technology point of view is a very wide topic, and for the learning of the basics of the artificial intelligence, its application in different fields on which usually questions are asked in the prelims and the mains examination, you should go through this discussion of the Daily News Simplified of 17th March 2021, in which Naved sir has already beautifully explained various aspects of artificial intelligence, its applications, and also some of the concerns and the strategy that has been unveiled by the Niti Aayog regarding the implementation of artificial intelligence in India. And one of the biggest concerns regarding the artificial intelligence is the ethics related to the artificial intelligence. So it is highlighted that how do we ensure that the AI applications are unbiased, equitable, transparent, civil, and inclusive. So, for understanding the various aspects of the artificial intelligence, its application, and the ethical debate, as well as the strategy unveiled by the Niti Aayog, you should go through this Daily News Simplified. A link of this DNS will be provided in the description below. However, in this discussion, we will restrict ourselves to the rights of the children vis-a-vis the artificial intelligence, and also what are the potential risks and the potential opportunities that can be used from the artificial intelligence for better development of the children. So this is one of the strands of the debate, and we will focus on that only here. Now, concerns have been raised regarding lack of legislation for regulation of artificial intelligence related to the rights of the children. And it is highlighted that the artificial intelligence powered algorithms can have a say on whether a child is at risk or decide what video they should watch next. And as time goes on, artificial intelligence will likely have more sway in what healthcare they can get and what educational opportunities can be offered to the children. So, what are the rights of the children that should be kept in mind while formulating a legislation for regulation of artificial intelligence for children? So, first in this line is the right to privacy, which includes the protection of children's personal data. Now, every time a child interacts with a digital service, their data profile becomes more visible to the artificial intelligence agencies or the algorithms. And these data profiles are precisely used by the artificial intelligence algorithms to make decisions. So the concern here is that how can we ensure the privacy and the protection of the children's data as it is collected by the artificial intelligence companies and is used to formulate or design the artificial intelligence related algorithms for profiling of the children. And this right to privacy of the children should be kept in mind while formulating a legislation related to the artificial intelligence regulation for children. Second right that needs to be kept in mind is the right to protection against discrimination, abuse, and exploitation. Now, in future, the artificial intelligence for children will involve making decisions that will impact their lives. And as such, it becomes important that we ensure the system is free from bias and discrimination. Now, algorithmic bias can cause racial, sexual, and age discrimination. And without the right safeguards in place, this could mean that the children can get impacted by unfair systems or the unfair algorithms that are created by the way of artificial intelligence. Third right that needs to be kept in mind is the right to healthcare, education, and information of the children. So, if the artificial intelligence for children involves making decisions that affect these core needs, how to make sure that such algorithms of the artificial intelligence can ensure that the children can get the best opportunities. So this is another right that needs to be taken care of. And then there is right to express the views in all matters affecting the children. So the children should be educated about the artificial intelligence and how it affects them. And as such, it is important to teach an understanding of the systems that are set to impact children's lives so heavily. And finally, the right to complain formally and legally when the rights have been breached should also be provided for. So the artificial intelligence for children needs to be made accountable. And for this, someone has to be made accountable, and a way should be created for children and their families to address when such rights are breached. So clearly, while formulating a design for legislation related to the regulation of artificial intelligence for the use of children, these are some of the rights that need to be taken care of. And these include the right to privacy, especially regarding the personal data of the children. Second is related to right to protection against discrimination, abuse, and exploitation. And this is because algorithms under artificial intelligence can sometimes be discriminatory in nature. And when the artificial intelligence is put to use for healthcare, education, and information, it should be ensured that the children get the best opportunities in terms of healthcare, education, and information. Also, the children should be educated about artificial intelligence so that they have a right to express views on these matters. And finally, there should be a right to complain formally and legally when such rights related to right to privacy, right to protection, and right to healthcare are breached by the way of artificial intelligence. Now, what are some of the risks associated with the artificial intelligence that is used for children? First risk is related to data security. Now, already a debate is going on regarding the risk of artificial intelligence related to data security. And the children do not necessarily know the impact of sharing their data or how the companies are going to use that data. So, one of the biggest concern or risks associated with the artificial intelligence for children is that of data security related to the information that is revealed by the children to the AI companies. Second is that of future risks. Now, as jobs are shifting and changing under the influence of artificial intelligence technologies, the skills will also need to be shifted. And accordingly, the children will grow up in a world with a very different job landscape. And as such, they need to learn now the skills that will help them in succeeding in future. And then there are developmental risks associated with the AI for children. So one of the important risks related to the development of the children is that how this artificial intelligence is going to affect their behavior and development. And children are the most malleable and impressionable as compared to the adults. And as such, concerns have been raised regarding the misuse of AI in encouraging bad habits like the technology addiction, etc. Then there is also the risk of artificial intelligence impact on social development and the communication skills of the children. And this is because we normally do not interact with the artificial intelligence in the same manner as we interact with other human beings. So if children are interacting with the AI more than others, then there is a question as to whether this could have negative consequences in terms of their social development and the communication skills. So these are some of the risks that need to be taken care of while artificial intelligence is being used or deployed for children. Now, despite having certain risks, there are also potential benefits for using artificial intelligence for children. In this, one of the benefits can be the facial recognition of the artificial intelligence could support the right to safety by helping the authorities in finding lost and abducted children. And you might be knowing that a lot of children are trafficked across our country and across the globe. Further, the artificial intelligence could support the right to education by aiding teaching and learning in both the classrooms and also during the playtime with the use of artificial intelligence toys. Then another important use of the AI that has been highlighted is the AI chatbot friends, and they could help in the social development of the children. And this is because such kind of chatbots can provide a safe place to talk about bullying for the children who are afraid to tell the adults. And as such, these AI chatbots can act as friends for the children that feel lonely at times. And also, they can provide support to the kids with learning disabilities by allowing them to practice social interactions in a safe place. So, here we have looked at some of the risks associated with using AI for children and also some of the potential benefits of using the AI for children. And besides this, we have looked at what should be the scheme of legislation look like while regulating the artificial intelligence for children and what are the rights that need to be taken care of while formulating such a legislation. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 7 talks about the issues that are associated with the interlinking of the Ken and Betwa rivers. Now, this interlinking of Ken and the Betwa rivers is being undertaken under a tripartite agreement that has been signed between the governments of Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, and the central government. And it aims at transferring of surplus water from the Ken basin in Madhya Pradesh to the deficit Betwa basin in Uttar Pradesh. And this project is a part of the National River Interlinking Project, which aims at connecting 14 Himalayan and 16 peninsular rivers. Now, this article basically talks about the impact that this interlinking river project is going to have on the ecosystem in the Ken Betwa region. However, we will restrict our discussion from the prelims perspective only. Now, such kind of interlinking rivers become important for us because in the year 2016, a question was asked in the preliminary examination and it talked about recently linking of which of the following rivers was undertaken. And it was related to interlinking of Godavari and Krishna rivers. So in this regard, Ken and Betwa rivers originate in Madhya Pradesh and are both the tributaries of Yamuna. And Ken meets with Yamuna in the Banda district of UP while the Betwa meets Hamirpur district of UP. Now there are some dams that are located on the Betwa river. These include Rajghat, Paricha and the Matatila dams. One of the key important aspects from preliminary perspective is that the Ken river passes through the Panna Tiger Reserve. This can be asked in the prelims questions. And also that these rivers are the tributaries of Yamuna are also important from the prelims perspective. You can see the location of these rivers in the map, the Betwa and the Ken rivers. Besides this, you should also remember about the important tributaries of Chambal and Yamuna that originate from the Madhya Pradesh, etc. So this national river interlinking project is being undertaken, and in this, the surplus rivers of Himalaya are going to be connected with the deficit 16 peninsular rivers. In this, some of the projects that have been given go ahead include the Daman Ganga and the Pinjal link project, the Par, Tapi and Narmada link project, and the Mahanadi Godavari link projects. Now, various aspects of the issues associated with the interlinking of rivers in India have been discussed in detail in the DNS of 4th March 2020, and in the description of today's video you will find a link to this discussion. This is a very detailed discussion. Go through this and try and understand the different aspects or problems related to the interlinking of rivers in India, on which a question was asked in the mains examination of this year in the General Studies paper 1. And you could have easily answered that question if you had gone through this DNS video. So go through this video to improve your understanding of the topic of interlinking of rivers. So with this we conclude today's discussion, and this is the question for the day.